that Sardis also had this temple that was devoted to the goddess Artemis, the goddess of fertility. What we also know about Artemis, and we study the other churches, that if you recall to the church in Ephesus there was a temple to Artemis. And if you're familiar with all the wonders of the world, the temple of Artemis in Ephesus is listed as one of the ancient wonders. What's interesting is that in Sardis, their temple to this goddess was the exact same square footage. So it was meant to be just as grand and just as lush. But something weird happened where as they were building it, people grew complacent, and all of a sudden this temple was half built. So from the very beginning, it kind of stood as a temple in ruins. And the issue that people had within the city was people had money, but they didn't have the drive to finish the task that they had at hand. They grew complacent. One of the problems was that people had this attitude of living within their former glories, remembering about the old times when things were particularly good, and they held on to these things, and for some reason, holding on to these things kept them from moving forward. Let's backtrack and read the first verse again. Here Jesus is saying, and to the angel of the church in Sardis, and one of the things that I realized as we read this is that all the letters to the churches start out by saying, to the angel of the church in Sardis. And the thing that really struck me this week is that we remember that churches are not led by mere human beings. We are comprised of people, imperfect people, but we have to remember that there are supernatural things at work. There are angels and demons waging war over us all the time. But there's also this comfort in knowing that Jesus, one of the ways that he ministers to us is that he designates at least one angel over every church, protecting us, watching us. It's not that angel that we worship, but we worship our God. But it's noted that we're not alone and that we're never meant to do ministry on our own accord. So that was a quick side note. To the angel of the church in Sardis write, the words of him who has 7 spirits and the 7 stars. This language would have been really interesting to somebody living in Sardis at the time, because when he talks about the 7 stars, there was this Roman emperor who declared himself to be so good that he referred to himself as a god. And when he referred to himself as a god, one of the things that he also did was he minted a bunch of coins that bared his image on them. And on these coins was also 7 stars. As again, reminding people that he is a god. Because his number 7 always noted special meaning in terms of a sense of completion. But Jesus is pretty much just laying his hand down and he's saying, all right, so you have a God king who says he's a God. That's cute, okay? I'm the one true God. And before that, he says the words of him who has the 7 spirits. It's not as if there are 7 spirits, because we know there is only one Holy Spirit. But what he's saying is that I am God in completion. This was really something I needed to know, because this is one of the things that was asked of me on my ordination exam that I had a hard time with. And now I know it. I kind of want to email the doctors and the guys who were testing me and let them know that I think I got the answer now. So Jesus is saying, I am he who has the 7 spirits of God. I am God in completion. I don't merely display a couple attributes of God. I am he. I am the living God. And what's awesome to me is that before Jesus even lists out the problems that this church has, he starts by giving us the answer to these problems. I am he, I am God, I am the answer which you seek. I am God in completion. When I'm going to give you the answer now, so that when I show you the problem that needs to be revealed to you, you can come back and realize that the answer has been in front of you the whole time if you would seek me. And I feel like that's just the way that Jesus works. A lot of the times we come to him bearing our problems, feeling like we are inconsolable, just without wisdom, completely without it. But all of a sudden when we come to him, he has this answer that may be tangible in different ways, but it's always rooted in the fact that what we need is to seek him more. And I think that's awesome. So God is saying, I am God in completion. And he says, I know your works. You have the reputation of being alive, but you are dead. And one of the scariest things is that as Christians, as churches, is we could be dead and not even know it. Oddly enough, growing up, I've always really been into zombie movies. I don't know why. It's something that I pray through every now and then and wonder if there's like something weird going on about me. But now as a pastor and as a Christian, the idea of being the living dead has a completely different meaning, where it just reminds me that apart from Christ, that's exactly who I am. But something that terrifies me is the thought that this might be us and we might not even know it. He says, I know your works. You have the reputation for being alive, which means at some point they were doing it. In the midst of this culture that was committed to Artemis, they were sharing the gospel, and there were enough Christians in the area that they built up a church. So people were coming to life. And he said, you know what? Your reputation precedes you. But your reputation was just a reputation. When people get to know you, they'll find out that your works are dead. And he says, wake up. And I'm going to say that again because I don't think Jesus says, you're dead, wake up. I'm pretty sure he says you have the reputation for being alive, but you're dead. And he says, wake up! And I'm okay with the fact that that fell. He says, wake up and strengthen what remains because you're almost dead. And if you don't do anything, you're going to lose it. And this should be haunting because I believe that churches will come and go and that the gospel of God will keep moving. But it should shake you to your core to know that at one point, if we don't do our job, if all we are is a group of Christians coming together, then this is going to be over one day. He says that you got to strengthen what remains and is about to die, for I have not found your works complete. And Jesus is saying, guys, you did a good job. You had a reputation for being alive. But you weren't done. I find your works incomplete because you were supposed to be faithful to the mission until we were done. But for some reason, you stopped caring. You stopped moving and you stopped working. It's as if, to lighten the mood a little bit, you got to give me a chance to lighten this up. If I offer to do the laundry at home, if I tell my wife or not to, hey, you know what? I got this. I'm going to do the laundry. I take the laundry of mine, of hers, and all the kids. I put them in the wash. I put them in the dryer. And then I leave them in the dryer. You guys ever do that? You guys ever do the laundry and then you put it in the dryer and then you leave it in the dryer for like 3 days straight and you take them out and it's just a wrinkled mess? I wasn't done when I put the clothes in the dryer. I needed to take everything out of the dryer, fold them, and put them away. My job wasn't done. Or what if I boasted about me cleaning up the lawn, where I mowed the lawn, but I left the bag of hedgings just everywhere and it became a scattered mess? The job wasn't done. He's saying you got to be faithful until completion. I really wish I didn't slam this podium because now it's really short. I'm going to show my wife the video later. She's going to make fun of me. Thanks, bud. I guess it worked that happened while I was yelling because there had to be some humor in it so that you wouldn't be completely turned off by what I was going to say. The job isn't done, guys. And one of the things that I think Jesus is bringing up is that we can't live our Christian lives, our ministry lives in such a way that we can look back and say we had a heyday in ministry. One of the things that really gets under my skin, having done youth ministry for a long time, is when I see my peers and they look back at their commitment to Jesus as a distant time in their life, where they look back and say, you know what? Those couple years, I gave God everything I could those years. And then I wonder, I say, so you're done now. It's like you look back, you gave him everything you had like a decade or 2 decades ago, and you stand here now and you say that you're done? When everything about the calling says that we have to be faithful until completion, but for some reason you think you're done. Interesting. Your works were not complete in my sight, in the sight of God. And the reason that's terrifying is because Christians and churches can be dead and not even know it. They could be going about business as usual and not realizing that they're slowly dying. So the question I bring is, how did this happen? And how do we avoid the same judgment? So again, I hope that you would bear with me as we walk through these things. The first thing that we need to do in order to avoid this same judgment, to avoid the same consequences, the first thing we need to do is differentiate between being dead and being dry. What's the difference? To be dry is to feel distant from the Lord and feel this yearning where you know it's not okay. We go through dry seasons. But God is, because of this dry season, there's also this part of us that just wants to throw caution to the wind. Reflecting Psalm 42, where he says, as the deer pants for the water, so my soul longs after you. Where in a dry season, we know that this isn't right, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to be satisfied, because nothing satisfies and quenches my thirst the way our God does. We go through dry seasons. The difference between a dry season and a dead season is, if a dry season is knowing that we're distant and not being okay with it, being dead is to know that we're distant and being okay with it. Kind of saying, this is just how it is. This is the world that we live in. This is the best that we could do. So we're just going to keep going on doing this business as usual, and slowly we're going to fade away. So the first thing we need to do to avoid the same judgment is differentiate between a dry season and being spiritually dead. The next thing we need to do is differentiate between what is routine and what is ritual. By routine, I refer to just checking a bunch of boxes on your list so that you could go about your own lives. We do this within our churches where we say, okay, what I'm supposed to do as a Christian is I'm supposed to go to church, I'm going to pray, I'm going to sing a bunch of songs that are about God, I'm going to say a bunch of words that won't exist in my life apart from this church building, and then I'm going to live my life again. If the way you live your Christian life is checking boxes so that you could satisfy the demands of a big, scary God, I'm sorry, but you haven't really entered relationship with God. At this point, God is just this external force, this seemingly angry external force that you're just doing a bunch of things in order to keep his anger at bay. That's not relationship. That's a perverted religion at best. The difference between doing things that are routine, just showing up on a Sunday and going to small groups and then being unaffected, the difference between doing these things and doing these things ritualistically is, while routine things are things that we check off our boxes so we can do what we want, rituals, we're coming to realize, are things that are really important. You see people doing like weird things. You see people going up to a free throw line when they play basketball and they're about to take a foul shot. And they do things that are seemingly mundane, but have become part of their routine where they feel that things aren't going to be right unless they do them. When Jason Kidd was still playing for the then New Jersey Nets, he would dribble a basketball a couple times, and then he'd blow a kiss in this direction towards his wife and his son. And I'll be honest, I thought it was weird. I was single. I'm a dad now. It's less weird. It's kind of cute. But you come to realize that if he all of a sudden changed this routine, if 3 years into blowing this kiss in his wife and his son's direction, if all of a sudden he stopped doing it, you know he would have felt off. The same can be true in our relationships. Think about what it's like to be with your spouse. For me to wake up every single morning and see the same person. For me to go on the same car ride day after day, month after month, year after year. To sit at the same table and having some of the same meals. If all we're doing is going through the same